Bam Pow Comic Hour with your host, Andrew Lauder.
And Chris Ramos.
Tonight, we do our first indie review presented by Josh Wilson and Ghostpod Publishing. He presents Twilight Custard.
Twilight Custard, illustrated by Willam Muljo.
Yep, and Josh Wilson wrote it.
Yes.
So this was a very interesting story that came to us through the interwebs, and we're very excited to talk about and share with you tonight.
Yeah, so Josh gave us a line, a little shout out and said, hey, I've been listening to your podcast, and I have a publication coming out in January of 2022.
Yes, so we got the exclusive scoop.
Yes, we're way ahead of time. We're like months ahead of this.
Yes. So we are very thankful, and shout out to Josh for sharing his story with us. And we are so excited to check it out. And we had a great time reading this.
Yeah, so it was sent over to us as a PDF, a many page PDF.
Yes.
Which was great for us digitally to read. So I can't wait actually to get a hard copy in my hands.
Yes,
so
in January. And then we could put it on the shelf.
That's right.
See, hopefully it has a good spine.
Josh will tell you right now, we're going to buy it when we see it. So
yes,
let us know where it is.
Yes. You have the Bam Pow Comic Hour stamp of approval.
Oh, that's so early. Now we have to talk about it.
Well, for me.
For me too. Good job,
Yes.
Josh. Actually, it was really
Yes.
a fun kind of like, I don't know. It was, the novelty of it was kind of cool. Like here it was so like almost like an early press pass, you know,
Right.
like we got to see the film before anybody else did. So it was really cool just to sit down and read this sort of never before seen publication from their creative minds.
Exactly. And so you may ask, what's Twilight Custard about? And from what I figure, the story takes place in the 1800s. The main character's name is Twilight Custard, and we follow his adventure in this during like the Civil War era, and that he comes along and he runs into this automaton, ancient robot, just kind of discovered in the Wild West.
Yeah, so the comic actually opens not really much of a like a big giveaway, but the funny thing is whenever I finish reading something, I guess a good way to say it too is when you first start reading, you're sort of, what is that? Who is that? What's going on? Right. And when I get all the way to the end, sometimes I go back and reread the beginning just a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Because at that point, then you're comfortable with the characters. And usually there's something really important at the beginning of the story that you wanted to catch and hang on to, but so many other things were happening, right? So you kind of have to go back to the beginning and just see what it's about. So I did when I all finished up, and I guess we should mention the file we have is 137 pages.
Yes.
So I would say probably, let's see, there's probably a dozen pages at the beginning, and there's probably about
there's
10 at the end or something.
Right. Yeah, I think there's like 5 pages of extras.
Yeah. So
sketches and things.
Very cool with the extras. Love that feature. Love that little touch with anything I'm reading as far as the comic book base goes.
It always is cool to find a collected edition you like after reading it, enjoying it, finding out how the process was made and where the sketches came from and how the ideas came together.
Yeah. So the very beginning of it, you're thrust into the mid 1800s. Texas is still at war with some of the outlying riffraff that they're trying to clean up,
and we're kind of still grounded in like American history.
Yeah, and it was a really good okay, this is cool. It's very, very much in that period, and you have no problem jumping right into it, you know. And then you notice our main character, there is a tragedy that has befallen, and so there was more than him, but now it's just him. So then you kind of get this lone figure.
Yes, the lone cowboy.
Yeah,
straight out of like something Clint Eastwood would have made.
Yeah, lone cowboy Twilight.
Yes, and you kind of have a definitely relatable feel to him. He's just kind of just trying to get by, survive, and kind of figure out what the difference between his right and his wrong and his kind of his path.
Yeah, like what is his daily life, like what is he doing? It is cool to note that his name is Twilight and his horse's name is Midnight. So I thought that was
I
really
didn't catch
cool.
that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
I was like, all right, that's cool. It's cool. And his horse is black. So okay, that's cool too.
Right.
So, little things through the story. We right away picked up on the writing style. Like, isn't
Yes.
totally top to bottom text, right? Like, it's not
Yes,
very text
absolutely.
heavy.
I think he likes to let the art speak for itself.
Mm-hmm.
And, the writing is just seeing and observing what is going on around the space.
Well, kind of like
and interacting with all the cast.
that, like
and things
that time period too. I mean, it wasn't like
Sure.
constant
Yeah. Blah, 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 blah,
ramble.
blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah.
It
Nope.
was just, it's a quieter way of life a little bit.
A little bit. It moves a little. It's a little slower, but it's this story is very evenly paced. I liked it.
Yeah. So early on, Twilight sees a meteorite fall to the earth.
Yes. The meteorite spaceship,
big
this
explosion
big thing
thing.
from the sky.
So
it's all great sci-fi adventures.
and we're not giving away too much because the cover of this shows a cowboy on a horse with a robotic head sticking out of his saddle. So
yeah, he's adorable. He's a little buddy.
I think he's kind of like a baby Iron Giant
Yes,
or something.
actually,
right?
I was thinking the exact same thing. Like his
He's like-
eyes and just pokes out.
He's like
his mouth
the
in waist form.
younger Iron Giant.
Yeah, it's the small one. Yeah, small Iron Giant. It's the small giant. Yeah.
If you haven't seen Iron Giant, this is our plug. Go see it. It's an
yes,
awesome movie.
90s
It's great.
classic favorite.
Very, very, very
Yes,
cool.
I grew up with that too. But I guess let's take a step away, and we're kind of alluding to it, but let's talk about the art style.
Yeah.
What makes this unique? So this art style is all in black and white, but it is drastically different than our previous black and white story, Sin City, that we read. This is a very unique style to its own.
Yeah. I mean, at first glance, when you look at a comic, you probably first expect color. Right?
Yes.
Like, of course, you're like, well, but this one has ink washes and different shades and different tones to kind of tell the story and keep it sort of in this not so bold world, right?
Sure. Can you describe what ink wash is?
So ink wash is so first you do like a real loose sketch, and you can sometimes even see some of the lines underneath from what William is doing. And I would imagine those are just sort of guiding lines or just sort of a little bit of a sketchy idea of like, this is where the page is going to go. But then after that, you just take different levels of ink and water it down to the point where either it's a very, very light gray or just straight black ink where it's very, very dark. So a lot of times you'll see Twilight's pants or his hair or like something that's like a big break in the mountain or,
especially his background.
And his horse is, jet black.
Because his background's so very fluid.
Mm-hmm. So you kind of pick up on the contrast of each panel, which is awesome because it really helps your eye like go to like what's important.
Yes.
So if something is more detailed or has more, I guess, a more bold ink wash part of it, then your eye kind of comes to that. Naturally, if a lot of it's blur and out of focus, and then there's one part of something that's in focus, that's immediately where we all jump to. And I think William does a great job of kind of like moving you from one panel to the next. And, we kind of commented on the feel of this story moving along without text, but we also kind of commented on like the action moving it.
Yes. It definitely, the action speaks for itself, and it definitely walks you through the story and makes you care about, all the characters that are moving through it.
Yeah. And the other challenge, and this is props to William, is that when you have a comic and there's, 10 different characters or 12 different, it's really important that you're able to give them some distinguishing mark or some sort of a unique look that when they show up 5 pages later, that you're not lost on who that person is.
Yes.
Other comics that do a great job of that is like Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. Some of their stories have sort of the same time frame or the same feel of people, right?
Yep.
But they're just unique enough. Like they have a scar over their eye, or they're always wearing a white hat, or they're always
Mhm.
wearing a vest or
Yep.
whatever, you know?
Especially if they're like a recurring character that comes
Yeah.
back. You
So
know,
you're
you
like,
can
oh,
like
that's
pull that
that
up. That's
guy,
guy.
you know?
Hey, I know that guy.
Same idea, you know,
Sure.
in The Walking Dead, you know, they always keep their same sort of costume look. They're always same sort of haircut. So in Twilight Custard, there are some recurring characters, and there are some flashbacks, and there are some
Yeah.
things. So you could get lost, but actually they do a really good job of keeping you right there with it.
Sure. And I guess before, we jump out of the art, I do like when he did use color very sparsely.
Hmm.
It's fun when you find out that point when he did use the color and how that just changed the mood and made it like an effect.
Yeah, like the blue.
Yes.
It just becomes a blue ink wash, which is awesome too. So
Yeah.
but you can tell that this isn't a after effect. Like they didn't just drop this into Photoshop and start
No,
recoloring.
absolutely not. You can
It's
tell like you put it on a canvas.
Yeah,
or
it's got
something.
like that grungy feel. It's got that really hand drawn part of it. You know,
Right.
like
And when we were talking in the pre-show, I described it almost like a manga. It's
Mhm.
it's black and white. It's kind of pencily, but the inks definitely give it more excitement and more effects and stuff like that. This is kind of like what the ink wash though. This adds a different feel to it though, compared to a manga. It gives it a little more uniqueness and expression to it that I really appreciated, just to kind of set itself apart from what else is going on in the graphic novel world and things like that.
And
So it's
you
cool.
know, and that said, you can tell that the lettering was
Yeah,
added afterwards.
sure.
It's a digital ad, which is really actually doesn't bother me because
Yeah.
old school, they used to hand letter all of the words, right?
Mm,
And I think that was number one, it was difficult because you had to sort of paste over the image and to come up with
true.
little cutouts and everything, and then they would, you photocopy them and pull it back,
Yeah.
and they really moved to a digital way of adding text and then picking a font and just sticking with it.
Right.
So it kind of makes it easier for you to read. There are, professional letterers, and there's professional people that choose where that's going to go on the image, or they just have artists sometimes leave a little spot, like a little circle, like here's where
Sure.
that text is, and here's
But I
where that
don't think it
text
was
is.
too
It
too
wasn't.
distracting though.
No, and that's what I was gonna say. It wasn't distracting and didn't take away from the artwork either.
No.
Sometimes you see like text boxes,
Yeah, or
just,
narration.
oh my gosh, it's
then
like
text.
right over
It's like
people's
there's no
face.
art. You can't even see anything. You're like, oh, okay. That's all Stan Lee and
There's-
Ditko, man.
Yeah,
They
there's
do
so much
that.
going on here. What's happening?
Right. So that was I really enjoyed this art and some of the liberties they took with it. So it's very cool what they had going on. But I guess back to the characters in Twilight Custard. The cowboy himself, and the robot automaton that he runs across. I love this. Like, it's not buddy cop, but it's a very in that feel of it. They're going always back and forth.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah,
just
that's a
really
good point.
bonded well. And I like following those guys.
You find out the robot can talk back, so
Yeah.
it is kind of cool to have that. If obviously, if you had a story where the automaton couldn't say anything,
Mhm.
that would be very difficult to kind of like progress the story, right?
Yeah.
So it is cool that they can kind of
Give them a
banter,
personality.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like a CP30 or an R2D2 in a way. It's kind of like a combination of the two.
Well, and they start learning each other's, I guess, behavior.
Mannerisms
Yeah.
and behavior. Yeah, sure.
He kind of alludes that he already knows the outcome of things or whatever, but it is funny to see that sort of challenged in the story.
Yeah, I think he keeps asking like, why don't you know what's going to happen next?
Yeah.
Well, there's something that's blocking my vision.
Like, are you an all-seeing eye or something?
No. I just claim to, I try. I see it once, but then it's something's blocking. So it definitely gave him an opportunity to explore this like challenge that they have to overcome.
Yeah, and the other,
Or he's flawed. The characters are flawed too.
that's true. Like they have a little.
That's my favorite kind of stories, is that they're flawed.
Well, and
Not perfect
I think
characters.
it's also, props to the guys that they tried to give you a little tour of like their town a little bit, a tour of like sort of his hot spots. Like Twilight goes down to the
To
saloon
the tavern,
and he hangs out.
saloon, yep.
And then you get the idea that there's sort of good guys in the area and bad guys in the area, and
Yeah.
that they try to build a little bit of a side story. So the main story is not just that a cowboy finds a robot.
Yep.
An out of place robot is kind of like the bigger
Mhm.
idea too.
Yeah.
But the story also kind of progresses with other people in town and other people in the
Yeah. What the
area.
politics of the time
Sure.
would have made commentary on this robot and how they deal with that. And not like they're not clearly evil or bad, but obviously they don't like it. So it's kind of cool to just see that just all that come together
Well,
and
like
just
you
conflicting
pick up on
events.
tension. You're like,
Yes.
I don't know what's going to happen here. Like,
Hmm.
is this person a good person, or sort of that same idea. Like I said, going back to Walking Dead, you kind of get that every time you kind of come across someone. It's like, well, what is this person's motive?
Yeah.
So they really actually don't play all their cards right at once, which is kind of cool.
Yep.
I think that's neat because
You can
it,
roll it out and
yeah,
pace it
like
out very
take your
well. And
time on it.
yeah, especially like if you're doing a Western, like you don't put it all up front, you kind of let it slow roll a little bit and it'll build up and build up before you get to the climax.
Now, I wouldn't really consider this, since we're talking about sort of the pacing, I wouldn't consider this like a short story. I think it's still long enough
Yeah.
to consider it as like a small graphic novel or something like
Yes.
that. Like the story has enough in it.
Right. So if you think if you said 20 pages is an issue, and then this is like almost the 6 issues, 6 7 issues.
Yeah,
That's about right. If it's like a short volume.
that's true. Yeah, and then they would gather that up into a graphic novel anyway. So
But I,
yeah,
I
very
like
cool.
that this is just all in one. Like you didn't need to know anymore, nothing prior. It's just all self-contained.
Hmm.
Um, and maybe you might want like historical context if you're that nerdy about it, but but I think if you just sat and opened it up, you enjoyed the story.
Well, so okay, so let's talk about this part. So, do we think that they could uh, expand on this? Is
Hmm.
there another story in there? I mean, we're not going to tell you the ending or really maybe
Yeah,
what happens beyond 3/4 of the book or so.
sure.
But just the way that the ending happened, or maybe this robot kind of this idea can kind of be pulled into other
Sure.
areas
I
too.
think you could either do a prequel, because of all the
Oh, that's true.
flashbacks.
Yeah, that's cool.
I don't know if you could do another story based around Twilight Custard unless you put a twist on it.
Yeah, and I don't know if there were any characters in here that were real big standouts. There were you were like, oh, I want to know a whole story on them.
Sure.
I
Maybe the robot,
yeah,
the automaton, maybe like his world where he came from, or if he ever came back to Earth, or if he was there, he comes back to Earth, revisits like the site or something, or maybe the world. That could be interesting. I definitely think there's potential to do a follow up.
yeah, yeah. I mean, fine. At least just pulling this world aside, which really this world is our world. I mean, there really
Yeah,
wasn't much. Um,
zaniness.
sometimes, yeah, sometimes you read and you're like, well, this is not Earth, obviously,
Hmm.
But this one is very grounded, and I think that helped the reader sort of just flow right into the story, where
Sure.
you weren't really trying to figure out. Sometimes you're reading and then there's like a monster that appears and you're like, well, that is not Earth. Like we don't
Hmm.
have blades of grass that kill you or something. So the idea of this was it's a spot in history that people are aware of, so that you don't have to like jump too far out of history. Sometimes when you write a story about like ancient Egypt or something, like you're pretty far removed from that,
Right.
right?
There's
Like,
not a lot to imagine or to relate to.
yeah. So these are still people that we can feel a connection with, and there's still a time period that we can feel a connection
Yeah.
with. And it's the state of Texas. It literally, a lot of
Yep.
times says you're in Texas. Well,
Right.
that's cool. So we can immediately connect with that too.
Sure. I guess how does this type of western that we just read compare to something like Pulp by Ed Brubaker, or maybe something
Hmm.
like Six Gun?
Yeah. So I mean, lately there has been. I don't want to like downplay this story and say there's like an influx of westerns, but there are definite like genres that you immediately connect to, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like when you read this story, you're like, oh, this is, it's human nature for us to just start saying, well, this is like that, and this is like this.
Oh yeah, the
And
license,
I
yeah.
kind of hate doing that too. Like,
Mhm.
oh, this is like Iron Giant. Well, it's not. I feel
Yeah.
like it is, but it's not.
Sure.
It is its own story. And
It would be
its own
interesting
story.
to hear what his influences were and
Yeah.
like what he was watching or how he was inspired by it. I definitely think that there's stuff from like we mentioned, like Clint Eastwood films or like the Iron Giant or
Mhm.
maybe like all the other like Western stories out there, Jonah Hex and things like
Yeah,
that.
or maybe you're just like, I'm a huge
Cowboys
Western
versus
fan and
Aliens
I
was a
know
thing.
the genre well.
Right.
And I always wonder too, like when writers are writing about, you know, period of Victorian era, like,
Oh yeah,
are
especially a
you really
period
super
piece
into
like
it?
this.
Sure. So, the amount of research, you can tell there's research that's going on. And at the same time, I think when we look at the feeling that this story puts you in, I think it's spot on. Like you feel like you are sort of watching a Western,
Yeah,
like you feel like
absolutely.
you're not jumping out of it. And I think I read this probably over the course of like maybe 2 or 3 nights, right?
Sure.
Like,
I read
it's
in one
okay.
sitting. I binged it.
Oh my gosh. Oh,
It was a rainy Sunday. I had it. I was like, all right, let's check
Here
it
it
out.
comes. Here comes your social life,
Yes.
right
Yep.
into the front here for everyone to be able
Don't judge me. Like sit down with a good book and just
I spent all Sunday on this.
it was like an hour, a couple hours.
The Twilight Custard Sunday.
I can't wait to like read it like in print. In a physical copy. Don't get me wrong, but
Well-
I think this really serves it.
Okay, but that just proves that it flows very well.
Yes.
Sometimes you got to walk away from something because you're just like, oh gosh, that was a brain bust.
Oh right, yeah.
But this flowed well. The story moved along great, and there are parts of it at the end that I thought became pretty prolific a little bit.
Yeah, it
like,
was trying to make a statement towards
Yeah.
the end.
the writing became stronger.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, there was a message you definitely get from Josh that he wanted to get a point across about this connection they had.
yeah, and that probably happened in the last like 20 or 30 pages.
Right.
Like it really built to that point, and you kind of knew like, all right, I don't know which direction this is going. And then at that time you're like, okay, I can see what's happening here, and let's get the overwhelming, idea across.
Yeah.
There is a part that I kind of pulled apart from the storyline that I thought was really nice. The automaton.
You like that word, don't you?
I don't know. I could say robot.
Well, no, I think automaton's more appropriate because
It's not a cyborg.
it's not a
because
cyborg.
like-
It's not this high tech robot. It's very simplified. But he's like old school.
Yeah, he's not like a killing machine, right?
No, he's
like,
just
so
a simple like automaton.
his automaton makes it think it's cute.
Yes.
It's a cute little robot. All right, so I'll say that the automaton. So there's a part where he's just sort of witnessing people and animals, and just in general, people being afraid of death, or just thinking about death, or just the fragile nature of just humans, right? And robots usually do that. They're just like, oh, humans, you're so weak, kind of thing.
I think like Data from like Star Trek. or
Yeah,
something
it's like, we can be repaired, but you guys break easy, kind of thing. So he says, there's one part where he says, in death, you will find that your concerns while living were only keeping you from being happy and from making the most of the time you had. So it's
and
kind of
that was
cool.
the point of why I put the book down. Went, oh.
Yeah. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like, so it's like right now, you are worried about life, and you're worried to the point that it's keeping you from being happy. And then when you die, you're like, oh, I could have been happy, but I was worried about life. And so it's kind of this weird little circle.
It's a very different statement for describing like human nature and things
Right.
like that, and the pursuit of happiness. It was just a very different take on it, and that made you like pause. It makes
Yeah, I mean, you always hear that sort of old adage of, don't be afraid of death while you're living, because you're supposed to be living. Like,
Yeah.
to stop thinking about dying, just
Mhm.
live.
right.
And I think the story, and maybe Josh will be like very happy that we're talking about this because I feel like that was the idea was,
Yeah.
there are people, they're fighting, they're living, loved ones are dying, and there's only so much that a person can go through, but at the same time, you're still here, and
Hmm.
that's sort of the Wild West mentality, right? Like you're still here.
Yeah.
So it was very cool to think of it that way.
Right. Definitely speaks volumes for sure. And I think that's what we got.
So yeah,
Yeah.
very cool
Very
story.
cool. Thank you, Josh, and the whole team for letting us see your baby, your exclusive, the Twilight Custard. if you
So
will.
everyone, put this on your list. Twilight
Yes.
Custard,
Comes out in January.
January of 2022,
Yep.
and I'm gonna say it's I don't know. It's gonna be, I guess, since it'd be double sided, it'd be about 70 pages or so. So
Yeah.
70
Oh,
double
right.
sided, yeah,
Yeah.
full color kind of thing. So yeah, add it to your list. You're gonna really like it on your shelf. So here's us, 2 thumbs up. Thank you very, very much.
This is Bam Pow Comic Hour signing off.
Goodbye.